So our background in infrastructure, we've built about $4 billion as a family to date. And I think what that has taught us is to truly recognize how big these supply chains and these large companies truly are. And with that, how do you bring sustainable solutions that can actually fit into their existing operations to finally get sustainability to scale? And I think from a food perspective, we really figure that out from our business, Do Good Foods, where we're collecting surplus grocery food, creating a dried feed, and that feed can then go into every existing producer of animal-based proteins and finally bring a sustainable solution to decarbonize our animal protein system to the masses. And I think that's what's really unique about taking that infrastructure approach, that recognition, and then how do we really change the world as quick as we possibly can. Tech has been absolutely key and critical for kind of driving the growth of these sustainable solutions. So when we talk about, for example, Lollyware, which is a seaweed-based bioplastic, it was a whole lot of technology to understand how do you take seaweed, which is just grown in the ocean, and actually pelletize it into what looks and feels exactly like a plastic resin. And so the technology was able to really condense that time frame from a development process, and then a technology to actually create those pellets that then can now go into the existing equipment of every large single-use plastic manufacturer. And what's important there is that that seaweed-based pellet can now replace plastic pellets, and yet not actually change any of the business operations of these major producers. Similarly with Do Good Foods, when we talk about food waste, there was a tremendous amount of technology and a tremendous amount of iterations of that technology to figure out how do you take 160 tons of surplus grocery food, which is the amount of food that we were collecting at Do Good Foods, and convert that into a dried animal feed and enable that to happen on a daily basis. So technology has played an intimate role in everything that we do, and it's really about leveraging that capabilities to drive the impact that we are all desiring as big and as quick as possible. Yeah, so I think climate change really comes down to a math equation where resources are going down, population is going up, and there's a tremendous inefficiency in the middle. And it is up to us as kind of entrepreneurs to recognize that nature doesn't really operate in that capacity. Nature's very good at creating circular economies and utilizing all the resources to the benefit of a whole lot of additional cycles that aren't necessarily easy to understand. And I think technology enables us to first understand that and see that from the ground level. And then from an entrepreneur perspective, how do we recognize and utilize nature to help solve some of these inefficiencies that we as humans have created? So I think the whole notion of circular economies, upcycling of resources into its next best usage, and creating additional inputs into the current macro supply chains that leverage nature in a technology way and help change what we have as humans kind of screwed up for the better is really what's, I think, really unique about this. But I think from a resource depletion perspective, that is the most key and critical aspect that I think us as climate change kind of leaders don't necessarily focus on. As we get into a math equation, everyone can understand it and everyone recognizes it. It's not just greenhouse gases and a graph going up. This is about true math. When we are running out of resources, that means that we will not have more drinking water. We will not have soil to grow our crops. We won't have food on the table. That hits the heart in a much different, greater way that I think we need to really be prioritizing from a messaging perspective. I think the technologies to creating the right technology or solution are immense from the challenges perspective. I think whenever you're doing something new, there's always inherently risk. There's always inherently uncertainty as to what to do and how to do it. And then when you think about how do you actually drive the change that is necessary at the large scale level, you might have figured out something at the lab level or the pilot facility, but how do you now build the next 30 facilities to actually transition the economy to that next sustainable solution? And so technology will always consistently needing to be adjusted. And our family approach and our family kind of message is we reserve the right to get smarter every day. And I think that humbleness and that humility in a way that recognizes that no one has all the solutions, because if they did, hopefully we would be using them to actually solve this problem already. And so inherently with a lot of the sustainability messaging and initiatives, there's going to be new things created. There's going to be things that break. But I think if you are open and honest with where and how and the scale of the technology of what it currently is, and then how do you continue to leverage that and grow bigger, I think you can continuously figure it out. So measuring is the most important thing for a sustainability message and for also empowering and engaging not only consumers but also corporations to be a part of the solution. Everyone likes numbers and everyone likes to see them tick up. So from a food waste perspective, we know exactly how many pounds of food waste that we have collected from all these retailers. And we call it surplus grocery food, not food waste, because we actually preserve the value of that nutrients. But to date, we've already collected and upcycled over 40 million pounds of surplus grocery food in the first year. That has corresponded and correlated to over 5,000 tons of CO2 saved. And what's so unique about Do Good Foods, which quite frankly was one of the first ever USDA approved third party verified scope 3 carbon reduced equations, was that we are actually able to measure the carbon intensity of our process from start to finish with real primary data, meaning we actually understood how many miles that our trucks drove, how many kilowatt hours and BTUs of taking the surplus grocery food, creating the feed, and then the distribution of that feed into the feed mill, and then the inclusion ratio of that product into the overall animal's diet. So we were actually able to quantify that each Do Good chicken, the product that we were selling, was actually saving 3 pounds of greenhouse gases and 4 pounds of surplus grocery food. And we were the first ones in the world, in our opinion, to actually put that on the back of our package so that we actually gamified helping to save the planet and empowering consumers to be a part of that solution. New Zealand has been so advanced and so amazing in all the sustainability initiatives that have already been implemented. And I think the true connection and recognition of the food system, specifically in New Zealand, is quite unique and powerful. And I think as we collectively, globally, hopefully create more circular closed loop systems, I think New Zealand can continue to not only see that and continue to leverage what the rest of the world is doing, but also be a leader. I think some tips that New Zealand can hopefully utilize to reduce the impacts of climate change on some of your current industries is the recognition that technology is relatively easily translatable. And I think that's what's so powerful about the kind of world that we currently live in. You can take a solution in the United States or elsewhere and immediately implement it. And it might not be the perfect fit. And that adaptation and that kind of creativeness, I think, is what makes business and life so beautiful, where there is not a perfect fit. There's not a perfect solution. But as a serial entrepreneur, it's kind of the time that there's no better time than now. And you just got to kind of jump in and do it, especially if you know that it's the right thing to do and the right thing for the animal, the soil, or the environment. I think you can then link it to a consumer story, and people truly care now.